The auditorium buzzed with excitement, lights glaring down on a stage where dreams were made or broken. A line of confident singers stood in the wings, their fancy clothes sparkling under the spotlights. They whispered and giggled, pointing at a woman standing alone at the edge of the stage. Her name was Lila, and she looked out of place. Her plain brown dress was faded, her shoes scuffed, and her hair was tied back in a messy bun. The other singers, with their shiny outfits and practiced smiles, laughed loudly, mocking her. "Who let her in?" one sneered. "She looks like she's here to clean, not sing." The crowd chuckled, and even the judges raised their eyebrows, barely hiding their smirks. Lila clutched a small, worn notebook, her hands shaking. The host called her name, his voice dripping with doubt. "Lila Gray, you're up." The laughter grew as she shuffled to the center of the stage. The microphone felt heavy in her hands, and the bright lights made her squint. The audience leaned forward, expecting a disaster. The judges folded their arms, one already scribbling something on a notepad. "What's your song, Lila?" a judge asked, her tone sharp. Lila took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the crowd. "I'll sing The River's Call," she said softly. The singers backstage burst into louder laughter. "That old folk song?" one whispered. "She's going to ruin it." The music started, a gentle piano melody filling the room. Everyone waited for her to fail, to crack under the pressure. But then Lila opened her mouth, and her first note rang out. It was like a wave crashing over the room. Her voice was clear, powerful, and so beautiful it felt like the air itself stopped to listen. The laughter died instantly. Mouths dropped open. The judges froze, their pens hovering above their papers. The singers backstage went silent, their smirks fading. Lila's voice soared, each note wrapping around the audience like a warm hug, then rising to a strength that shook the walls. The crowd gasped, some clutching their hearts, others leaning forward in their seats. It wasn't just singing, it was magic. But just as her voice hit its highest, most breathtaking peak, Lila stopped. Her eyes widened, and she stumbled back, dropping the microphone with a loud thud. The music cut off. The audience gasped again, confused. The judges exchanged shocked glances. What just happened? Why did she stop? Was this part of her act? Or had something gone terribly wrong? Lila wasn't always this nervous. Days before the audition, she lived in a small village where nobody thought she was special. She worked at a bakery, kneading dough and sweeping floors, her days quiet and simple. But Lila had a secret. Every night, after the village slept, she'd sit by the river and sing. Her voice was her treasure, something she shared only with the stars and the water. She'd never sung for people, never thought she was good enough. But one day, a stranger heard her by the river. He was a music teacher passing through town, and he begged her to try out for the big city audition. "You could change your life, Lila," he said. "Your voice, it's not like anything I've ever heard." Lila didn't believe him. She was just a baker, not a star. Her family laughed when she told them about the audition. "You? On a stage?" Her brother teased. "Stick to bread, Lila." But the stranger's words stuck with her. What if she could do it? What if her voice was special? So, she packed her old dress, her only pair of shoes, and her notebook full of songs she'd written by the river. She took a shaky bus ride to the city, her heart pounding with fear and hope. At the audition, she arrived early, clutching her notebook like a shield. The other singers were dazzling, with coaches and fancy vocal exercises. They ignored her at first, but when they noticed her plain clothes, the teasing started. "Go home, farm girl," one said. Lila kept her head down, her cheeks burning. She wanted to run, to hide back in her village. But something inside her, maybe the memory of the river or the stranger's kind words, kept her there. As she waited for her turn, she overheard the judges talking. "We need someone fresh, someone real," one said. "But these singers all sound the same." Lila's heart skipped. Could she be what they wanted? Or would she just embarrass herself? The teasing grew louder, the lights felt hotter, and her hands shook harder. By the time her name was called, she felt like a mouse in a room full of cats. Now, standing on stage, she'd sung just one no-tone, perfect, earth-shaking note and stop. The silence in the auditorium was deafening. The host rushed forward, picking up the microphone. "Lila, are you okay?" he asked, his voice nervous. The crowd murmured, some standing to see better. The singers backstage whispered, "She choked. I knew it." But Lila's eyes were fixed on something in the audience, something nobody else could see. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. What had she seen? Why had she stopped? And would she ever sing again? The auditorium was frozen, every eye on Lila as she stood trembling on the stage. The microphone lay at her feet, its thud still echoing in the silence. The host, a tall man with a shiny suit, hovered nervously, waving at the crew to pause the music. "Lila, what's wrong?" he asked again, his voice softer now, almost kind. The crowd leaned forward, some whispering, others craning their necks to see what had stopped her. The judges scribbled furiously, one muttering, "What a waste of a voice." Backstage, the other singers snickered, their confidence returning. "Told you she'd choke," one hissed. But Lila didn't hear them. Her eyes were locked on a figure in the back of the audience, a shadow in a dark coat, barely visible under the dim lights. It wasn't just any shadow. Lila's heart raced as memories flooded back. She hadn't seen that coat in years, not since she was a little girl. It belonged to her mother, who had vanished one night when Lila was only 7. Her mother used to sing to her by the river, her voice so beautiful it made the stars seem brighter. Lila's own singing came from those nights, those songs. But her mother left without a word, and Lila never knew why. Now, that coder won just like it was here, in the crowd, watching her. Was it really her? Or was Lila's mind playing tricks, cracking under the pressure of the stage? The host gently touched her arm. "Lila, do you want to try again?" he asked. The crowd murmured, some shouting encouragement, others laughing softly. Lila blinked, tearing her eyes from the shadow. She bent to pick up the microphone, her hands still shaking. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "I can keep going." The judges exchanged glances, one raising an eyebrow. "Let's see if she can recover," she whispered to the others. The music started again, the soft piano notes filling the room. Lila took a shaky breath, trying to focus. She couldn't look at the crowd again, not at that shadow. She closed her eyes and thought of the river, of her mother's voice, of the songs in her notebook. She started singing again, and her voice was even more stunning than before. It was like a light breaking through a storm, clear and strong, filling every corner of the auditorium. The crowd gasped, some clapping before they could stop themselves. The singers backstage stopped smirking, their faces tightening with envy. One judge dropped her pen, her mouth open. Lila's voice climbed higher, weaving through the melody like a bird soaring over the river. It was perfect until her eyes flickered open, and she saw the shadow move. The figure in the dark coat stood, stepping closer to the stage, and Lila's voice faltered again. She missed a note, her breath catching. The crowd noticed, their cheers turning to confused whispers. The judges frowned, one writing, "Unstable under pressure." The host stepped forward, ready to stop her again, but Lila held up a hand, her eyes wide with determination. "Please," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Let me finish." The host hesitated, then nodded, stepping back. The music looped, giving her another chance. Lila gripped the microphone tightly, her mind racing. Was that really her mother? Why was she here now, after all these years? And why did it feel like the figure was waiting for something only Lila could give? Back in her village, Lila's life had been small but full of quiet dreams. After her mother left, her father worked long hours at the mill, leaving Lila and her brother to fend for themselves. Her brother grew tough, teasing Lila for her silly songs. But Lila found comfort by the river. She'd sing her mother's old folk tunes, writing new ones in her notebook. The river seemed to listen, its gentle ripples matching her voice. When the music teacher heard her, he'd been stunned. "You're not just good, Lila," he said. "You're extraordinary. You have to share this with the world." But the world felt so big, so scary. The city audition was her first time leaving the village. On the bus ride, she'd clutched her notebook, reading her songs over and over. "What if they laugh?" she'd whispered to herself. "What if I'm not enough?" When she arrived, the city was overwhelming tall buildings, loud noises, and singers who seemed born for the stage. They practiced fancy scales, their voices polished but cold. Lila felt like a sparrow among peacocks. The teasing started the moment she walked in, her plain dress making her a target. "Did you get lost on the way to the farm?" one singer joked. Lila stayed quiet, her notebook her only friend. Now, on the stage, she was proving them wrong, but only for a moment. The shadow in the crowd had shaken her, pulling her back to that night her mother left. Lila remembered her mother's last words. "Keep singing, Lila. It's who you are." But why had she left? And why was she or someone who looked like her here now? As Lila sang, her voice wavered, torn between the beauty of the music and the fear in her heart. The figure in the coat stepped closer, and Lila saw something glint in their hand, a small, shiny object, like a locket. Her mother used to wear a locket, one Lila had drawn in her notebook years ago. The song ended, and the crowd erupted in applause. But it was mixed with confusion. Lila's performance had been breathtaking, then uneven, like a bird flying into a storm. The judges clapped slowly, unsure what to make of her. The singers backstage whispered, "She's talented, but she's a mess." Lila stood frozen, staring at the figure. The host stepped forward, smiling nervously. "Thank you, Lila. Please wait backstage for the judge's decision." As she walked off, the figure in the coat turned and slipped out of the auditorium. Lila's heart pounded. She had to know who it was. Without thinking, she ran after the shadow, pushing through the backstage crowd, leaving the judges and singers stunned. Where was she going? Would she find the answers she needed or lose her chance at the audition forever? Lila stood on the stage, her heart hammering as the echo of the backstage crash faded. The judges stared, their faces a mix of concern and impatience. "Lila, focus," the head judge said sharply. "Explain yourself or you're done." The crowd buzzed, some whispering about her talent, others about her strange behavior. Lila's eyes darted to the curtain, where she'd seen the dark coat slip behind a prop. Her notebook trembled in her hands, its pages filled with songs tied to her mother. She wanted to run again to chase the shadow, but the judge's stern looks pinned her in place. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice small. "I thought I saw someone I know." The second judge, a man with kind eyes, leaned forward. "Your voice is special, Lila, but you're falling apart. Can you sing again right now to prove you belong here?" Lila nodded, swallowing hard. The host signaled the band, and the soft piano of The River's Call began. She closed her eyes, picturing the river, trying to block out the shadow, the locket, the fear. Her voice rose, clear and strong, wrapping the audience in its warmth. The judges nodded, impressed, and the crowd cheered softly. For a moment, Lila felt like she could do this. She could win. But then, a soft creak came from backstage, and her eyes snapped open. The curtain twitched, and the figure in the dark coat stepped into the light. It was a woman, her face half hidden by a scarf, holding the locket. Lila's voice cracked. and she stopped mid-note. The crowd gasped, and the judges groaned. "Not again," one muttered. Lila didn't care. She stared at the woman, her chest tight. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice carrying over the microphone. The woman froze, then pulled down her scarf, revealing a face so familiar it stole Lila's breath. It was her mother, someone who looked exactly like her. The auditorium went silent. The woman's eyes were wide, filled with tears. "Lila," she said softly, stepping closer. The host rushed forward, confused. "Ma'am, you can't be here," he said, but the woman ignored him. She held out the locket, its chain glinting. "I never meant to leave you," she said, her voice breaking. Lila's legs wobbled. She stepped off the stage, ignoring the judges' protests, and walked toward the woman. The crowd watched, spellbound, sensing something bigger than the audition unfolding. Lila stopped a few feet away, her eyes locked on the locket. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice shaking. The woman opened the locket, revealing a tiny photo of a young Lila, just like the one her mother used to show her. "I heard you were singing," the woman said. "I had to see you." Lila's mind spun. Was this really her mother? Why had she left? And why come back now, in the middle of her biggest moment? Before Lila could speak, a security guard grabbed the woman's arm. "You're trespassing," he said, pulling her toward the exit. Lila's heart lurched. "No, wait!" she cried, rushing forward. The judges stood, shouting for order. The crowd erupted, some cheering for Lila, others demanding answers. The woman struggled, dropping the locket. It clattered to the floor, and Lila dove for it, her fingers closing around the cold metal. As she looked up, the woman was dragged through the exit, her eyes locked on Lila's. "Find me by the river," she called, before the door slammed shut. Lila clutched the locket, her world spinning. Had she just lost her mother again or gained a clue to find her? And what would she do about the audition now?